Hey everyone, in this video I'll be sharing with you how you can turn around completely lost positions. Now I'll be sharing with you a game that I recently played where I was basically dead lost, my king was wide exposed, I was down a bunch of pawns, but I still ended up turning around with the key concepts I mentioned throughout the video. So make sure you watch the whole thing and you grasp this mindset of turning around losing positions. Okay, so this is not the losing position, however, but I'll show my game starting from here so you have a much better idea of the game and how things ended up panning out. Now we aren't too far away from basically the completely lost position, but if you want to skip ahead, I'll leave a timestamp below. Anyway, in this position, white is trying to create some sort of counterplay on the queen side and basically use his pawn advantage to try and simplify it down to perhaps just queen and rook endgame and slowly win from there. What I'm trying to do in this position is basically create counterplay on the king side with h5 and hopefully get in h4 in the future and open up this king to try and checkmate with moves like queen g4 and rook lifting. So in this position, white decides to stop that and plays h4 himself, which is a good move. And now I play the move g5. Now the engine doesn't like this, but practically speaking, I think it's not a bad idea, given that this is a rapid game and I'm playing against the 2300 online. So it is very plausible that he'll, under time pressure, end up making mistakes. And again, the engine says this is objectively bad for black, but only if you play the accurate move back to back to back. And white is not an engine. So as the game goes on, my opponent grabs the free pawn and I offer another one. And the idea is really simple, that I just want to open up the king side and bring my queen and rooks in. And in fact, if my opponent takes on h4, which he didn't, but if he did, then I'm already completely winning here because I play queen g4 check, the king moves to, let's say, h2, I take again, and once he comes back, I give another check, and the idea was to basically grab the h-pawn and open this file up. So once the king goes back a second time, I just play king g7 and my rook is coming to h8 and it's basically checkmate and white is completely lost. So as I said before, practically speaking, white has to be really careful when playing, and my opponent in fact already blunders. He plays king g2 and here queen d5 check wins. Unfortunately, I didn't play this in the game, but to quickly show you, I give the check and let's say once the king goes back, I play h3, I threaten mate in 1, and the only way white can stop it is by moving the f-pawn or the e-pawn, in which case I'll end up winning back material and have a much more dominant position because his pawn structure on the king side will be messed up and more importantly his king will still be a target. So king g2 was a mistake. However, I played the wrong move order. I play h3 check and I allow him to go to h2, blocking my pawn, and now my queen can't go to d5 because then the king will just take my h-pawn. So I realized I messed up and I try to continue with king g7, trying to bring the rook over to the h-file and then play moves like queen d5. However, this gives white time to consolidate and he basically plays rook e1 to align his rook with my queen. Oops. He basically plays rook e1 to align his rook with my queen and also protect the e-pawn. So if he later ever has to move the f-pawn or whatever, it's fine. I play queen g4 trying to infiltrate into his position, and he simply plays queen e2 and he covers all his weak squares and he's offering a queen trade. And now obviously I try to avoid it and I win back one of the pawns. White is still up a pawn, however, and more importantly, my king is also now kind of weakness and white is actually taking shelter from my pawn, and when he needs to win it back, he'll take it once if we ever go into like a endgame. So here my opponent starts infiltrating with rook c5. I go back and he gives queen g4 check. At this point you can see how I'm basically almost completely lost because after king f8 he plays rook f5 and all his pieces are gonna start coming towards my king. This other rook will now infiltrate the same way this rook on f5 did, and once I move my queen, that's exactly what he does. I play b6 trying to stop the rook from coming in. Yes, I create a weakness now on c6, but that's the least of my worries. I'm not losing it right now because my queen protects it, and more importantly I'm just stopping him from bringing more pieces in. So this is one thing when you're trying to defend and you're completely losing position. Forget about pawn structures and all this stuff. You just want to basically stop his pieces from activating and basically make sure just make sure he doesn't bring more pieces in. Here he plays queen h5, trying to infiltrate into my position more, bring my king out more, and in this position I decide to play f6, leaving room for my king to escape in basically leaving room for my king to escape, because if I didn't play f6 and let's say just white gets another move and he plays queen h8, I would have to play king e7 and then he plays rook e5, basically winning my queen. And that was the main threat I really saw, so I just decided to play f6, restricting the rook more, and whenever he tries to check me on h6 or h8, I just try to zigzag my way out. So again, it's about trying to spot all of white's threats, which you can do through checks, captures, and attacks. And once you go through this checklist and identify white's threats, you quickly just try to find ways to stop them. I saw rook e5 as a threat, so just playing f6 works in this scenario. So again, it's about keeping your calm and just making sure you don't allow white to win easily. That sort of mindset. Once he gives that check, I start running my king. And here, yes, I am disconnecting my rooks, but more importantly, white isn't winning too clearly immediately. Yes, he takes my f6 pawn and he wins another pawn, but I play queen d5 and I'm threatening mate in 1 again. So if he gets a bit too complacent and plays a move like rook takes c6, bringing in the other rook, I just checkmate and I win the game. So here white also has to be careful, and he does. He goes back and he protects. Again, this is not the best way, and honestly white can take the pawn now and there's really no danger for the white king. But again, it still might be scary because my queen cuts off the white king this way, and if I ever get in rook h check, because this white queen moves, there are ways white can go wrong. So my opponent tries his best to defend without allowing any counterplay, but in that case he basically deactivates his rook with the sole purpose of just trying to protect against my mate threat. So again, as I mentioned before, it's about keeping your opponent's pieces passive if you can, and this is what I'm exactly doing. And king safety is #1 priority. You saw that I basically gave up my kingside pawns, but it was more important that I just safeguarded my king for now and just didn't get checkmated or lose a queen on spot. Now here I play rook g8 because I realized white doesn't have any threats, and it's just important that I start activating my pieces again. Yes, I'm completely lost, but if I just keep the self-belief, I can turn around and I try to act my pieces, who knows what happens, especially since time is getting low. Both of us have 4 minutes, but this was a rapid game, so we're definitely soon about to enter time scramble. And the mindset in this scenario should be, what if I can just keep the game going on for a couple of moves, not lose too much material, keep the position a bit unclear, and once we get into time scramble, you never know what happens. And this is why you should also train your speed chess, which I have a completely different playlist for if you want to check it out. Anyway, in this position, my opponent plays queen h6, and he has this very clear idea of taking on c6, basically boxing my king in and trying to create some sort of mate threats again. And also the immediate threat of basically playing rook d6 and winning a queen. So here I start running. Again, I'm not caring about losing this pawn. I realized even if I lose a couple of pawns, like this position is already way too dead lost, and I would be happy to give up a couple of pawns, but safeguard my king, activate my pieces, and just get into a time scramble where I also get chances to attack the white king. So it was first priority saving my king. So I play king c8, I lose the pawn, but I get to b7, and not only am I safeguarding my king here, I am also activating my rooks as now they're connected. And okay, my opponent goes back here, he plays rook d6, and I play queen a2. Now I'm creating another threat, and again, as you see the engine evaluation to the right, white is completely winning here, because at the end of the day I'm down 3 pawns and my king is definitely much weaker than white's king. However, as I said before, it's about entering that time scramble scenario, and I'm repeating this over and over again. And more importantly, I'm creating threat after threat, and I'm trying to keep it up. I mean, in this scenario, it's not move after move because I'm also trying to defend myself. But earlier I played queen d5, threatening mate in 1. Now I played queen a2, threatening to take on f2 and cause some sort of chaos. So my opponent gives this check first, and I run to a6, and he gives another check, and I go back to b7. Now I'm threatening to just repeat moves and try to go for a draw. And again, this f2 pawn is always on the back of my opponent's mind because I'm threatening to take it. So instead of trying to deal with checks and everything, especially as time ticks down, he just decides to defend. Again, now I'm keeping his pieces active, and my pawn is still somehow alive on h3, and white really doesn't want to spend another tempo trying to take it right now. White is probably looking at ways to checkmate my king, and this rook is still passive. And okay, here I continue to make threat after threat. I play rook f8, I hit the f2 pawn again, and now I'm activating both of my rooks, more importantly towards the white king. Here I'm not trying to offer a rook trade or anything. That would be really bad because white is already up material, so all he has to do is trade down to a winning endgame. I want to avoid trades at all costs, and I just want to activate my rooks and create some sort of counterplay, especially against this white king. Now my opponent gives a check, I go to a6, and he plays b5, and all of a sudden you see it's actually equal now. My opponent, after giving a couple of checks, plays the wrong move because here I go to a5, and surprisingly my king is safe because he doesn't have enough tempo to attack it. Right now he has no immediate checks, and the only way he can check me is through this dark square diagonal or accessing the 7th rake and hitting the a7 pawn. But he doesn't have that time because, as I said earlier, not only was I safeguarding my king, when I got the chance, I was creating threats and activating my pieces. So here I'm also hitting the f7 pawn. So here he has to spend time defending it, and also not to mention, he has to, when he defends it, it gives me another tempo, another opportunity to improve my position and create some sort of chaos, and basically safeguard my king that way by keeping the initiative going forward. And in fact, in this position, black had to be careful, and he had to sort of defend with a move like, I would say, rook g6. Not to mention, another threat in this position is that once the f pawn falls, that the g pawn would also be falling, and white is going to get checkmated. So taking this f2 pawn is like a really deadly threat. So the only way to really defend in this position is to play a move like rook g6 and try to offer some sort of trades. He is up a couple of pawns, and if he manages to trade stuff down, then the best I could have is perhaps just going for some sort of perpetual check, because once the trade happens, then the queen will also be protecting the g3 pawn as well. And even though even though he loses it, he does manage to escape. And of course white is still much better because he's up 3 pawns, but okay, under time scramble I can start giving checks and annoy him. Not to mention, I don't even have to go into this. I can just keep rooks on board, as I was talking before, and play another move and try to keep things going. So going back, that's what he should have done, but my opponent, as I said before, is not the engine. He can make mistakes as well, and in this position he decides to go back, and black is completely winning here with the move rook takes g3. And not to brag or anything, but I spotted this move pretty quickly, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because you can too by just improving your tactics by solving Puzzle Storm. So I have another video where I clearly explain how you should approach working on your tactics. I've tried a bunch of different methods, and the one that worked for me like much better than others was basically doing Puzzle Storm, that too in a specific way, not trying to solve as many puzzles as I can. So do check it out if you are interested. And going back to the game, I play rook takes g3. The idea is once he takes my rook back, I play h2 check. I use this pawn to force the king to the corner and leave this rook undefended, and I capture it and I win with checkmate. So going back, obviously white is completely winning, and he had many ways to win this. And of course you can't turn around every losing game, but like at least 1 in every 5 or 1 in every 3 you can manage to turn it around with this sort of mindset of trying to safeguard your king, trying to get your piece activated, just have this mindset of, can I survive just a couple more moves, try to get both of us down into some sort of time scramble, even if it means I'm giving up some sort of material, can I still try to stay alive and create problems for my opponent? This is the mindset you should have, and more often than not, you'll end up turning around games too. Because think about it, how many times have you screwed up the game that you're completely winning? It always sort of balances out in the end, where you can also turn around games that you're losing. It's not about just not resigning. You also have to still stay focused and have the belief like, okay, I can turn it around, and not just play aimless moves for the sake of not resigning. So I hope you learn this sort of mindset from this game, and yeah, best of luck in your future games. Hopefully you'll turn around a couple of lost positions as well, and see you next video. Bye, take care.